Okay, so before I begin, there is something I've been meaning to talk about, and I feel like I should address it. It's gonna be real quick, but does anyone else really love the transition scene from Kokkoku? We get a lot of clarification to Majima, and basically how she ended up in stasis, and what happened to her family, and how she knows so much information about the Heralds, or the Handler. So, in the best way to summarize it, she got very unlucky. Her entire family got very, very unlucky. And what I mean by that is that, as we know from how the stone works in the interstasis, the Master Stone has to be used. And when the Master Stone is used, anyone that has another little, simple stone, they could come into stasis alongside of the Master Stone. But the thing is they can't initiate to go inside, and only the Master Stone is the one that can initiate it, which is why they were waiting so long for, the old man, the grandpa, to actually use it. And so, it has to be at the precise time when they actually hold the stone to go into stasis. So, it's a very unlucky coincidence that happened to Majima's family, and why she lost everything, and how she was stuck in stasis. So I kind of feel very bad for her, because, that's unfortunate. That's really, really, really unfortunate to have something like that done. But let's start from the beginning. Let's kind of discuss the details in depth before we can kind of clarify what was going on. So basically, we had one of the little stones and all of that, is not a part of the Master Stone, just a little stone that you can go into stasis. You have it to where Majima, the girl, she holds the stone and all that, and you have the brother in the back seat with her, and then you have the mother and father in the front seat. And you have it to where, they're just having a casual conversation, they're going down the road and all that, they're just driving and all that. And all of a sudden you have it to where things go on in the back seat, and then basically a tear comes out, and everybody goes into stasis. Now, in that one moment, it lets us know that you don't actually need to have your blood to activate the stone. That is something that was clarified. Remember, let's back up to the first episode, okay, when, the Master Stone was used. We found out from the grandpa to activate the Master Stone, you would have to put your blood in the stone. Now, I could be wrong here, I could be reading into the details a little bit differently, because maybe the Master Stone operates differently from the regular stones, but from my general understanding, most likely, the old man, the grandpa, doesn't fully understand how, the Master Stone works, how to access it, and so he probably believes, since it was taught to him with blood, that's what he thinks is the only thing that can activate it, but maybe any form of physical contact, or maybe liquid from the human body, like spit, or, tears or whatever, it can also activate the stone too, because if a tear can hit it, because there was emphasis on that in this episode when the tear hit the stone that was being held, that does let us know it doesn't necessarily have to be blood that accesses it, so it doesn't have to be that brutal. So that is something that was clarified, or hinted at the very least. Now moving into the next segment, the stasis happened, and besides it being a lucky coincidence, or a very unlucky coincidence for the family, it does bring into perspective of how scary stasis actually can be, especially for people in the real world. Let's take, for instance, the father, okay? The father in the instance that was, driving the car. Apparently, he was driving the car, and when stasis happened, obviously, the car was still moving, but he didn't hit the brakes. So think about it like this. When stasis stops, and let's say the father isn't there, which we know for a fact he wasn't there, because, he got turned into a herald, we saw it. That means that car continued to move forward. It moved forward and hit into something. So that means that if someone was in a vehicle when stasis happened, they got out of it, that car would continuously move once stasis ends. So it's just a weapon, right then and there. So that's kind of scary in a way. That's a very scary thing to think about. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out, because that's a very scary thought with how the father was able to realize that he didn't hit the brakes, and so if he isn't in the car, gonna keep moving forward. Okay, next thing moving to, let's talk about how the father, he got weak-willed and he became a herald. So, this clarifies what was going on with Tsubasa, the brother, a couple episodes ago. As we know, the brother, he had, the weird, jellyfish, tentacles coming out of his back and all of that, and we get to see that once again in this episode from the family, Majima's family. We get to see it from the father, the mother, and the, brother as well. They all have their own little moment to where they have the tentacles coming out of them, and this represents them turning into a herald. And how this happens is if they lose the will to, I guess, live, or they despair, then it causes it to where the jellyfish takes over, and it takes over their body, and then they become a herald. So it's kind of like similar to how people have to have like ill intentions, how they want to attack someone. Well, it's kind of like that. For instance, if they have intentions of despair, just wanting to give up, then the jellyfish will take over their body. But if they have, like, intentions to kill someone, obviously the herald will come in and stop that said person. So, it's all about brainwaves. The jellyfish obviously runs off of brainwaves, and so depending on what you're thinking and all that can cause it to where certain things can happen. For instance, becoming a herald, or maybe even potentially getting harmed by a herald, or something else that were unknown or unknown to us that we don't know of could potentially happen as well, depending on a certain type of brainwaves. So that is cool. I do like that clarification. So, we gotta talk about what happened, okay, in line. So, the father, he became a herald first, dragged up into the air and all that. And then, the mother, she was very weak-willed, she became a herald. And then, eventually, a little bit of time passed, and the brother became a herald as well. And automatically, you gotta imagine, one after another, this constantly happening, it's gonna get stressful. It's gonna get very upsetting and stressful as you continuously see your family members just disappearing and leaving you in a world that's just completely stopped. It's a terrifying thing to think about. I mean, when you look at it from like a cool point of view, you're like, ooh, stopping time, that's cool and all that. But in reality, just picture it in real life, okay? Let's say in real life right now, time just stops. Everything just stops. I stop speaking, everything around you stops moving, just everything just stops. Imagine how scary that would be. It'd be cool at first. It would be cool. But what would happen if you couldn't leave it? What happens if you couldn't start time up once again? That's a scary, scary thought. And you gotta imagine, if you were left in this world all by yourself where nothing was moving, it would terrify you. So that's kind of what was being shown here. You know, every family member that was disappearing and becoming a herald was leaving the other family member by themselves. And eventually, only Majima remained. She was by herself. Now, obviously, we could see that she was at the point of turning into a herald as well, because she just didn't know what to do. She was lonely and had no idea what happened. So obviously, being confused as a kid, she didn't know really what to think at all. Eventually, she did encounter Juri. That was in, you know, that point in time in the stasis, and Juri actually saved her, which opens up a very important plot point for the show. Juri can actually kick people out without using the Master Stone. I didn't really think about this at first, but it's actually something very critical. Let's think about something, okay? As we know, the only way to leave stasis, from what we know of, what was discussed in the last episode, is that you have to have the Master Stone. So that is why they need the Master Stone. So if the old man decides to just leave and all of that with, you know, his family, everybody else, they're messed up. They're not getting out. They're stuck in stasis. That's what we know. That's what's been clarified. However, Juri kind of overrides this law. She can actually push people out of stasis and everything will be fine. For instance, she could kick them out of stasis, and they don't need the help of the Master Stone. Now, what was, you know, clarified a couple episodes back is if Juri does this, there is a potential possibility that the person could die. So it's not necessarily like a safe method, but at the same time, it is a way around using the Master Stone. So if for some reason, let's say the Grandpa or the Master Stone was taken away, technically, the way Juri's power works, she could potentially still save her family. Now, we don't know if she could do it to herself. That's left to be answered. We don't know if she could potentially do it to herself, but she could definitely save her family. If for some reason they all got trapped in there, she could save everybody else and get them out of there, but she might be alone all by herself too, unless she can also do it to herself. So that is something to think about, but then that brings up other questions as well. If Juri can kick people out of stasis, okay, without the use of the Master Stone, then that would mean that if the Master Stone was gone and time continued to move, if Juri was to make someone move once again after the Master Stone was gone and time continuously moved again, would they be in a different timeline? That's what I'm very curious about, because what is being clarified already in the series is that if the Master Stone leaves, then they're trapped in stasis. It's like a different point in time. It's kind of like, you know, imagine a film strip and all that, and then you pluck a little film strip out, and then you have this little point just, you know, suspended away from the main strip, just right there stuck. Well, if you put it back in, obviously time continues to move. But if, you know, the film strip is put in, but you're still left in the film strip up here, then technically the time is going to continuously move, and you're going to be left behind. And it's like you're no longer even in that reality anymore. So if Juri pushes someone back into the film strip, even though time has already moved, it makes me wonder, would they be in a separate dimension or parallel universe, or would they come back into reality from the main timeline? Like, is there one timeline? Is there multiple? I'm very curious about that. I don't know if Kokkoku wants to dive into something like that. I don't know if the writers fought that far for the series and how this time thing works, but that's what I'm wondering about, especially when that was kind of introduced in this episode. Made me start thinking about the whole thing with Juri and how she could kick people out of stasis. So, anyways, moving past that, though, the handlers, though, the heralds that were made, they obviously, there's more than one. We saw in this episode that there can be more than one herald at a time, so that's kind of scary. But at the same time, for the family member heralds, for instance, the little boy, Majima's, brother, and then mother to pop up like they did in this episode, it does make you wonder if there's not really that many heralds. Because either A, it's just convenient writing for her to see her family like that, or B, it, implies that there's not many heralds at all, and the only remaining heralds would be Majima's family. That's the only thing I could assume. And also, from what we've seen from inside of the other herald that disintegrated and died, if the inside of these other heralds, for instance, Majima's family, looks anything similar to that, then they're probably already dead, even if Juri's able to push them out of it. Which Majima even states, though, in this episode, that she's not necessarily wanting to, save them, bring them back to life. She, at the very least, wants to collect their bones, their remains, to be able to bury them. So, it does make sense why she would want to do that, because, she hasn't had to, the ability to properly bury her family, because they've just been suspended in a different, universe, basically, in stasis. So, it does make sense. She probably has come to terms with the fact that her family is long gone. They probably can't be saved, but at the very least, she would love it if Juri was able to push them out for she could at least bury them. So, yeah, that's an interesting plot point. So, it is explained now what's going on with Majima, and how she knows so much, and what she really wants out of all of this. She just wants to be able to bury her family. And I'm kind of surprised that Majima isn't really angry with, Juri at all. I'm very surprised about that, because you'd think someone that kind of ended up in that situation thanks to Juri's family, especially for a dog that died, basically, you'd think she'd be a little bit livid. But at the same time, maybe she's happy because Juri did save her. In a way, Juri did save her. And it is clarified that if Juri does knock you out of stasis, it doesn't necessarily kill you. Because, obviously Majima survived. So, yeah, it might be painful, but you don't necessarily always end up dead. Majima is a surprisingly good character. I figured she would be kind of annoying or whatever, but now I've seen the clarification of who she really is, I like her a lot, and I want more of her. Now, speaking of her, let's talk about that little exchange with the thug in this episode. So, Majima explains everything, and the blonde thug dude, she's like, will you help me? And the dude's like, I will, but you gotta do something for me first. You'll let me, have sex with you, right? And I'm just like my eyes what? 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 As soon as I saw that line, I'm like, did this man just say something like that? And then the cut to Majima's face with her eyes just all messed up. I know for a fact I'm probably using it as a thumbnail. I was just like, huh? I was like Majima in that, moment. I'm like, what? What? Oh, just a really weird thing to say. Okay. I figured Majima would be kind of against it, but she was kind of going along with it, so I'm just like, okay, that surprised me. That moment in this episode, that truly surprised me. Now, that's pretty much about it, besides, I guess, the father of Juri kind of being a little bit of a scummy person, and I do not believe he's probably going to be very helpful in the future. I feel like he's going to definitely turn against his father, and turn against his daughter, do something very scummy that's going to hurt them in the end. I definitely see something like that. I do. And, also, before I end this, actually, there is one last thing I do mention. How do you feel about, Tsubasa getting stabbed at the end? Do you think he's gonna die? Let's be real here, I highly doubt it. If there's anything that's gonna happen to the man, he's gonna turn into a herald. I don't think he's gonna die. But yeah, that's the last thing I want to say. So, you all have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. So please be safe. Chibi out.